I don't think I've ever been this impressed with a watch that has been sent in for review. This is Second Hour Watch's second watch that they've released, and it is exquisite in almost every way. And I think this is a watch that really fully realizes the vision that Second Hour kind of hinted at with their initial release last year. Today we're taking a look at the Mandala sports watch from Second Hour Watches. Hey guys, this is Dave. Welcome back to Just the Watch, a channel all about budget watch collecting. So if you are interested in watches or watch collecting but don't have a lot of money, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and follow along as I take a look at all kinds of affordable watches and talk about watch collecting. And today I have in a prototype of the new Second Hour Mandala sports watch. Now, this being a prototype, there's going to be some changes from the production version. I think most noticeably the clasp. I believe the clasp that's on this prototype is exactly the same one that was used on their dive watch, which they released last year. They're going to have a more appropriate clasp, I think, for this kind of more slimmed down sports watch. Second Hour Watches is a micro brand that was launched last year with the Gin Clear Diver. And like a lot of micro brands, they kind of played it safe with their initial one. The Gin Clear was a really well-built, well-spec'd dive watch that was fairly conservative in terms of design. The creator of Second Watches, a guy named Peter, has a passion for scuba diving and an interest in sacred geometry, which I'm not entirely sure what that is, but part of that kind of comes through in the designs of the watches, and it's cool to see, yeah, some interesting geometric influences in the watches that they've produced. And the Gin Clear Diver kind of showed off some of that. However, in naming their second watch the Mandala, I feel like he's really kind of taken that idea of sacred geometry and brought it to the center stage here and created a really unique sports watch that is one of the most interesting watches that I've seen in a long time. And that a lot of times is a bad thing, right? Like watches that are super interesting, a lot of times are just so crazy that, you know, they're only going to be for a very small subset of people. Somehow with this design, I think Peter has accomplished putting together a watch with just a ton of character and small, intricate, really fascinating details. And yet when you take a step back, it doesn't look odd. It doesn't look weird. It looks like just a really nice watch. And that's a trick that's really hard to pull off. This is a watch that is going to look great on your wrist in pretty much all occasions. And yet it's one that if you give it a moment to stop and start examining it at a little bit closer detail, you're always going to find some unique little twist to it that is really unlike any other watch that I've seen. Of course, design is only half the equation. The watch is also well built and well spec'd. You're getting a 40mm case with a sapphire crystal, BGW9 Swiss Superluminova, 100 meters of water resistance with a screw-down crown, and inside a Miyota 9039 high-beat automatic movement. Currently, this watch is available on Kickstarter for about $450 USD. They crushed their campaign goals in the first day. I think they're currently about 300% funded, so this is a watch that's definitely going to go into production. And I think you've still got about a week and a half left to get in if you're watching this video when it's released. This watch that I have is a prototype that is on loan from Second Hour Watches. I will be handing it back to Peter after the review is done. Anyways, let's go ahead and take a closer look at the Mandala from Second Hour Watches. Now, there is a lot to talk about on this watch. There are so many details that have gone into this, and you probably wouldn't notice them at first glance. But, you know, when you look at this watch, you can really tell, yeah, that there's a lot going on, that it is just a really beautiful watch. But let's go ahead and start talking through some of those details. First, let's go over the overall design. This is a sports watch, and I think that's the first thing you got to appreciate about this. It looks like it could be classified as a dress watch at first glance because it is such a beautiful piece. But really, the design is a sports watch. You're getting crown guards. You're getting a screw-down crown that's knurled. You're getting very thick, loomed markers and hands. You have a detailed minute track in this sort of white ring, and then you have minute markings going around the outside. So the design and the functionality of this watch is built for sports. You can take this in the water. It's highly legible. It's very readable. It's going to handle basically any kind of sporting activity you would throw at it. The dimensions fit that really well. You're getting a 40mm case, 20 millimeter lugs, a very nice slim 11 millimeter height, including that kind of boxed sapphire crystal on top of it. And this is a prototype, so I don't have the production clasp. The clasp that they've got on here is the one that I believe was packaged with the Gin Clear Diver, their previous release. But from the pictures I've seen from the newer one, it's a much more fitting clasp for this style of watch. But the clasp on the other one is a nice milled clasp. It is have the push button security, so it is made for sports and activity where it's not something that's going to pop off easily. But this is probably the most beautiful sports watch that I've seen. So second thing I want to talk about is just the the level of polishing and detail that they've put into this that really adds to the beauty of it. Chief among that, I think, is the finishing and the case design that they've done. Just a really elegant case, very kind of thin profile, nice curving, smooth lugs, and really great finish work on the polishing and the brushing that they've done. There's so many little highlights and accents on here that, it's just got a lot going on. So on the side of the case, you've got kind of this thin polished edge that goes along the entire side of the case, wraps around the crown guards and along either side of it. And then as you are approaching the sapphire glass on top, you just got a lot of little transitions going there on the bezel. The bezel starts with a brushed lip, and then it starts going into another angle that's also brushed, and then that transitions into a third angle that's now a wide polished area on the top of it. And then you have on top of all of that a boxed sapphire crystal. So a lot of different levels as you lead up to that. And then obviously just that beautiful blue dial with that guilloche pattern in the middle of it. Very elegant, very dressy kind of look. And that kind of perfect match of sportiness and elegance is, I think, enough to sell this watch. It's such a hard thing to pull that off well, and Second Hour has really nailed that. But on top of that, they've added a lot of really unique touches that are really, I think, personal and unique to Peter and the Second Hour brand. So one of the things that Peter is interested in and has tried to incorporate into his designs is this idea of sacred geometry, which I don't really know that much about. But I can see a lot of interesting geometric references in here that are very unique. So one thing that's carried over from the Gin Clear Diver is the emphasis at 12, 4, and 8. So rather than dividing the dial into 4 segments, it divides it into 3. And you can see that emphasis by this really interesting double marker at those hours. So at 12, 4, and 8, you have a second marker that hovers over the dial and sort of juts out. And it's sort of this kind of interesting little cliff that comes out over it that really adds a lot of dimensionality to the dial. It's amazing that they've been able to include this much depth and dimensionality into a watch that's only 11 millimeters thick. Another thing that is really interesting is the hand design, and that's maybe one of my favorite parts about this watch that kind of surprised me. So the edges of these hands, they have this kind of toothed look, where they sort of have 2 little points that jut out and then a gap in between. And actually that gap, I feel like, is just as effective in reading minutes and hours as would be a point. So I really like that. It's kind of something cool that I haven't seen before. And then obviously playing into the idea of geometry, you've got that guilloche pattern on the dial. Very geometric pattern, very appealing. And maybe that's where they've got a lot of the inspiration for the name, Mandala. That kind of references some of the mandalas that I've seen. The bracelet that they put in this, I think, really pairs well with this. It's this kind of 5-link bracelet with alternating brushing and polishing. It's incredibly comfortable, very articulate, almost like a mesh. It's a 5-linked bracelet, but really fluid and really cool kind of reflections that, again, really play well with the rest of the watch. Another thing that I really appreciate about the hands is how cleanly they're cut out. The hands are incredibly sharp. There's no rough edges, and that is, usually a pretty good sign of quality on the manufacturing end. So really nice to see that. However, when I did get some macro shots and really started zooming in, I did notice some imperfections on some of the markers and on the finishing of the top of the hand. So they are cut out really crisply, but there are some, minor markings on the hands. And I did see some dust and stuff on the dial that was, again, really only visible under these ultra macro shots. And I don't know if that's something that they'll clean up a little bit more when they get to the production. Again, this is a prototype, so that's something that they might be able to work on a bit on the production models. Because of the size and the slimness of the watch, it's very easy to wear and extremely comfortable on the wrist. 40 millimeter watch on my 7.5 inch wrist wears great. And with the crown guards and the slim case, the case shape reminded me a lot of my Hamilton Khaki King. However, this has much shorter lugs that helps it to wear, I think, a lot better than that. So overall, I think really, really good job on that. And yeah, having the watch on the wrist, it's just really beautiful to look at, really eye-catching, and overall a really fun watch to wear. Now this is a prototype, so there could be some changes going into production with the Lume, but even on this prototype, the Lume is really good. They're using a nice bright blue BGW9 formula for the glow, and honestly, I think it's on par with a lot of dive watches that I've seen. In the dark is really where you can see that choice to emphasize the 12, 4, and 8 numerals, because that double marker there on those ones, you get double the glow. And when the rest of the dial and all of the details and finishing and everything fades away in the dark, that's when you can really see the emphasis on that division of the dial into 3 sectors. Now, I have had a number of Kickstarter watches in recently, so I did a Lume test with 3 of them along with 2 other watches to kind of measure them against. And of the Kickstarter watches, the second hour Mandala, in my opinion, has the best Lume of those 3. There's a really good balance between the brightness of the hands and the markers, which is always good to see. It came in lagging a little bit behind the Seiko Samurai, but actually not by too much. So really not bad at all when it comes to Lume. As mentioned before, this watch is currently available on Kickstarter. You can pick it up for $450. I believe after the Kickstarter is over and it goes on live on their site, the final retail price is going to be about $565. And given the level of custom components and the design and the manufacturing that must have gone into producing this watch, I think that is more than a fair price at the retail price, and I think it's an excellent price at the Kickstarter price. If you can get that discount, that's a great discount to pick up. They have a lot of interesting colors to choose from, and a couple of different strap options that they're giving as stretch goals. I mean, the 5-link bracelet that this comes on is gorgeous. That's probably what I would be primarily wearing it with. I love the idea of this kind of sports watch that can go anywhere, do anything, and having a metal bracelet allows you to take full advantage of that 100 meters of water resistance and the screw down crown. But I can definitely see swapping it over to a nice leather strap for a more dressy look as being a nice option to have as well. So you can check out some of those. I believe all of that's available on the campaign page, so I'll leave a link to that down below so you guys can check it out. Anyways, that's going to wrap up the review for today. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.